We've done the AI predictions, we've done the bookies predictions, and I've also laid out my 1 to 24 predictions for the championship. So today, I'm going to complete the set and give you guys my predicted Premier League table for this season. Now, first thing that I noticed when looking through the Premier League teams is it's been an incredibly quiet window for most teams in the Premier League. So there's not much change in regards to the squad. So a lot of this is going to be a very early prediction based off of just what we know of the teams, their managers, etc. And like with the Championship, we probably will do another more up-to-date Premier League predicted league table after deadline day. So this will probably change, but for an early prediction, let's start somewhere from bottom to top, starting with the team at the bottom. So in 20th, I've gone for Ipswich Town. Now this, naturally, I feel a bit like Oxford in the Championship. It's the obvious choice, albeit I'd love it to not be, because I think Ipswich, fantastic story, unbelievable back-to-back promotions. What they did was unprecedented, especially in today's football climate. Going back-to-back in the Championship is ridiculous. But I do stand by the fact that the Premier League is tougher than ever. And as optimistic as Ipswich fans are, and they've made loads of good signings this summer, I do believe they'll still get a shock to the system when they get to the Premier League. And even if they do start well, the momentum will only take them so far, and I think the quality and the step-up will catch them out, and they will come back down. However, they do seem to be building a sort of Championship super team, following a similar sort of transfer strategies to what Luton did. So if Ipswich are to come back down, it's not a disaster, but I do think it will be too much for them to stay up. So unfortunately, I've got them bottom. In 19th, I've got Southampton. I do feel like two of the three Championship sides who've gone up will come back down. However, I don't want to predict all three, because that would just be a horrific example as to how big the gap is between the two leagues. We do not want all three teams who go up coming straight back down every single season. It's not good for the game. It's not good for the pyramid. So I feel naturally I have to pick one team to stay up. And unfortunately, Southampton are not that side. Now, I think Southampton have got a decent squad. I think a lot of the players who've gone up are sticking around. One or two have left, and they've made a few investments. But I still think they'll have to fight tooth and nail to stay up this season. And Russell Martin's lack of experience in the Premier League, I think, could come back to bite them. Of course, Southampton did really well getting up the playoffs last season, but they also had plenty of rocky moments in the Championship where things did not look all that great. So they are capable of having a few dodgy results, and in the Premier League, if you make mistakes, you get punished big time, and that's why I think, unfortunately for Southampton, they'll likely come straight back down. So in 18th, obviously I mentioned that I haven't got all three teams to come back down. So that means one Premier League side from last season will be joining them, and I've gone with Nottingham Forest. Now the simple reason is I say it, and I said this in my bookies and AI predictions as well, if it wasn't for the three teams who come down last season being so poor and so far adrift, Nottingham Forest were the next side to drop through the relegation trapdoor. And again, I don't want to be in a situation where the three sides who go up come back down and are miles away from everyone else. So for me, Nottingham Forest feel like the natural team to be embroiled in a relegation fight and possibly drop down. I don't think there's any other team that seem to be in any real danger or upheaval at the moment. A lot of clubs seem rather steady in the Premier League, whereas Nottingham Forest were the closest to dropping down. And I think with Nuno, I don't think he has convinced me all that much at Forest. I think his win percentage at the City Ground stands at 26% at the moment, which I don't think will do enough to survive. So I think, again, all it will take is one of the newly promoted sides to step up and do well, and I think Nottingham Forest will be victims of that. In 17th, I've gone with Leicester City. They are the single Premier League side who I've got to stay up, or the newly promoted side I've got to stay up, and there's not much differentiating them from the other two. I said this in the bookies prediction. Each newly promoted side equally has positives and weaknesses, and they might affect their season in a variety of different ways. But the one thing Leicester have got is Steve Cooper, and he is the only manager of the three who has got Premier League experience, and most importantly, experience in keeping a team up. And I think that will prove pivotal. I think naturally Leicester have got a ridiculous team. I know they've lost Dewsbury Hall, but the squad they had last year was way beyond the level of the Championship, and Maresca really should have walked the league by an absolute country mile. So we thought this last season Leicester had a Premier League squad in the Championship. I stand by that now, and I feel like with the addition of Steve Cooper at the helm, they're going to stay up, and it's probably a good choice that they've made that change, because if they'd still had Maresca, I'd have had them to go back down, but because they've signed Steve Cooper as manager, I think they've definitely got a chance. In 16th, I've gone with Brentford. I don't know with Brentford. I feel last season, yep, they had a drop-off, and they're absolutely allowed to have a drop-off because of how outstanding they've been since promotion. I don't think they'll be in any immediate trouble. I think maybe the bottom four will be adrift, and a bit like last season, that final relegation spot will be competed between maybe 2 sides, 3 sides maybe, but I just don't think Brentford will be bad enough to be sucked in. And as I say, there's so many, really stable, secure, solid sides in the bottom half of the Premier League. There's no others I can see being all that poor where something could go terribly wrong. I guess with Brentford, maybe they are teetering a little bit above the drop zone in terms of if they had 1 or 2 bad windows. They lost Ivan Toney, for example. That might put them in a bit of trouble. I know their record signing, who they've brought in, has just gotten injured, which is really unfortunate for them. But I still feel like they're an extremely well-run club. Frank is a solid manager, and they've got experience on how to get the job done. So even though they're a little bit closer to the drop than I think a lot of Brentford fans would like, I think survival for them is still fantastic. In 15th, I've gone with Bournemouth. A bit like Brentford, I feel like there might be a slight regression just because of the heights Areola got Bournemouth to last season. I think what he did is fantastic. And listen, I would love nothing more than Bournemouth to maintain that level, but I just feel like there are sides who were below Bournemouth last season who will improve. And that will mean a slight drop for Bournemouth, but I still think survival is key, and a 15th place finish isn't a disaster. I just feel like they had such an outstanding season last year, there could be a slight drop-off, but, this is Bournemouth establishing themselves in the Premier League once again, and I still think that's a massive positive. In 14th, I've gone with Fulham. Now, I'll be honest, the next 3 to 4 teams, they could be in any order. I think from 11th down to 14th, you've got a group of teams who aren't going to be bad enough to be anywhere near worrying about relegation, but aren't quite good enough to break into the top half and the top 8, for example. So, because Fulham are 14th doesn't mean they're going to regress, doesn't mean they're going to progress or anything. It just means that I think they'll continue to have a steady season under Marco Silva. Again, they're not a team I look at and think, wow, they could be in trouble next season. But they're also not a team that I look at and feel all that optimistic for either. So I think Fulham will just keep doing what they're doing, and they'll have another solid finish. In 13th, I've gone with Brighton. Now, I've propped Brighton up a little bit just because it's Brighton, and they've done exceptionally well over the last few seasons. I feel like they've got nothing to worry about, and Hertzler, who is a very young manager, can come in and fully focus on the Premier League. And I think naturally there's a bit of scepticism because of his inexperience, but I just have so much faith in Brighton, in a club, with how they operate, that they will be more than okay this season. I've got no major concerns, but I don't think in his first season he'll do all that much in terms of getting Brighton into the top half. I think this is the first step in a long-term project, and a 13th place finish I think is more than a good start. In 12th, I've gone with Everton. Now, I just feel like this is where Everton will peak. I feel like this will be it for Sean Dyche and Everton. Obviously, it's their last season in Goodison, and I feel like they're naturally coming towards the end of a chapter that's been very turbulent and very difficult. They have been improving gradually over the last season or so with Dyche, but I'll say it again, his Everton side have a ceiling, and I can't see him guiding them anywhere into the top half, but I still think they'll edge their way up the table. And I think just around this whole final season in Goodison will just give the club that extra bit of motivation and fire, especially at home, to really pull out some big results this season. And I think after that, they'll probably go with a new manager in a new stadium and really start again. But I think this will be the first step towards that, and they'll have a decent season before they leave Goodison, and they'll finish in and around 12th. In 11th, I've got Wolves. Wolves are a side that, dropped off a bit last season, finished, was it 15th, but were unlucky at times, massively unlucky with some of the decisions that didn't go their way, and I think under Gary O'Neill, they've got more than a solid enough side that I think do the basics right and are able to just get results. So again, they're in that same pack as Everton, Brighton, Fulham. I think any of these sides, maybe Bournemouth as well, could be in any which order. But I just have a feeling under O'Neill that he will take Wolves forward and he will continue to ever so slightly. And I think an 11th place finish would be fantastic for them. In 10th, I've got Crystal Palace. Now, I'm trying to not get too overly excited by Palace because what Glasner did when he came in last season was amazing. I couldn't believe some of the football I was seeing Crystal Palace play, and the goals they were scoring as well were absolutely outstanding. Now, they have lost Elise, which will be a huge loss, of course, but I still think they've got more than enough quality there, and I think we saw last season his philosophy, his style of play, I think will be very exciting for Palace, and I think it could take them into the top half. They've been a very steady Premier League outfit for a very, very long time now, and this might finally be the season where they take a step into the top half without doing anything spectacular. I think there's potential for Palace to do it. In 9th, I've come with Chelsea. Now, this might be the biggest shock of the ranking, but I looked at the rest of the teams in the top 8, and I'll obviously run through them as we go, but I do think, and I believe, that Enzo Maresca is a terrible appointment for Chelsea. I don't get it, personally. I don't get what's going on at Chelsea. It just seems constant chaos down at Stamford Bridge. You know, they've had absolute chaos for years and years with various different signings and spending money galore, and Pochettino seemed to finally be having Chelsea going in the right direction. And then for them to sort of rip it up, him to leave and them to start again, I don't get it. You know, and Maresca, you know, as I said in the AI and bookies videos, on paper, Premier League fans who maybe weren't paying much attention at the Championship might think, yeah, he got Leicester up by 90 plus points. He's an amazing manager. He wasn't. He was far from convincing with a Leicester side that should have been doing a lot better than what it was. And if you open that up to the Premier League where it's tougher, you get punished a lot more for mistakes, and he's obviously working with a far more expensive squad, I can see him doing something similar just on a bigger scale. And I've seen Chelsea in pre-season. Things do not look all that good. And I generally feel like they'll regress under Enzo Maresca this season. And whether they choose to keep him, I don't know. But I just don't have any faith that he'll get Chelsea to where they want to be. And he could be one of the favourites to be sacked this season, if I'm honest. And if he is, a new manager might come in and guide Chelsea to where they need to be, which is probably top 6. But if they keep Maresca, I don't have a good feeling about this at all. In 8th, I've gone with West Ham United. I think Lopetegui will take West Ham into the top 8. I don't think they've got enough to break into the top 7. I think the top 7 are set, if I'm honest, and are a little bit further ahead. But without the distraction of Europe, I think West Ham will have a much better campaign this season, and I think they will take a step closer to getting back into the Europa Conference League. I just can't see them taking a step backwards with Lopetegui in charge. So yeah, I think top 8 would be a good step for them. I just don't think they'll get any higher than that. In 7th, I've gone with Tottenham. Now, I just can never get too optimistic about Tottenham because we know what happens at Tottenham. They find a way to disappoint and put together a string of results where they underwhelm, drop points, and again, the top 6 and top 7, I think it's so tough and competitive. I think there were a few teams last season, you know, Newcastle, Man United, who underachieved, who I think will get back into the top 6 this season. And I think that is what keeps Tottenham out of it. And in 7th, which I do think would be seen as a disappointing season. And I'd love Postecoglou to take Tottenham into the top 5, top 4 even. But yeah, I just look at the teams above them and I just feel like they're in a better position right now. And that's why, unfortunately, I've got Tottenham to finish in a rather mediocre 7th. In 6th, I've got Aston Villa. The big caveat is, of course, they are in the Champions League. And we've seen with other sides that are not used to being at that level, like Newcastle, that trying to juggle Premier League football, maintain that high level, and also get themselves, you know, successful in the Champions League. It's tough. It's tough fighting on both fronts. Both levels are so high. and it requires a lot of physical and mental, strength and stamina throughout the whole team. Now, what I will say in Villa's defence is they've made a lot of signings. They're absolutely committed to making this squad as big as possible and ensuring they've got enough players to fight on both fronts. And they've got Unai Emery, who's got a lot of experience with clubs that are both fighting in a domestic campaign at a high level, but also in a European campaign as well. So I still have faith Villa will maintain a level of quality in the Premier League. They'll still maintain a high standard, but as I said with Tottenham, I think there are a few teams that will improve who don't have the same pressure and commitments in other competitions, and that's why Villa, I think, will drop down, but still, if they can finish 6th while fighting in the Premier League and the Champions League, I still think that's an outstanding result for them. In 5th, I've got Newcastle, and the simple reason for this is they've got no European football. I think that plays such a big factor. They've not made many changes to the team, and if Eddie Howe sticks around, I think he'll get them back on track. Unless he's tempted away by the England job, of course, which could derail the whole thing, I think Newcastle will get back into the top 6 this season. As I said, them and Man United are the two sides who I think will be looking to definitely improve this year, and I think by fully focusing on the Premier League, I think it will be a lot easier for them and they'll get into the top 5. In 4th, I've got Manchester United. Now, there are quite a few caveats with this one as well. Now, again, last season, 8th. Terrible finish, and one I felt sure would see the back of Erik ten Hag. But surely, with the squad he has at his disposal, he's got to get Man United into the top 4. If he doesn't this season, then I think he'll lose his job undoubtedly. He's being kept on, I think, for the FA Cup win and that alone. But there's no distractions for Man United. They should be in the top 4. I think maybe do they get Europa League or Conference League because they won the FA Cup? So maybe there is a slight distraction with Europa League potentially there. But even then, with the money Man United have spent, the squad they have, they should be top 4 or top 5. I think them and Newcastle will occupy 4th and 5th, or at least Man United, Newcastle and Villa will be 4th, 5th and 6th. But really, he should be getting this club into the top 4. And if he doesn't, or it doesn't look likely, he might get fired and they bring in a manager who does. In 3rd, I've got Liverpool, and I don't want to say it'll be boring at the top of the Premier League, but I do feel like there's a bit of a gap between the top 2, top 3 and the rest. I think Liverpool are in a world of their own at the moment. They're too good to be anywhere near outside the top 4, but I don't think they're on the same level as the top 2. So this is a tap-in, if I'm honest. I think the only thing that could disrupt this is the fact that it's Arne Slot's first season. He's going to need time to, have this transition, get the team playing his way, and I just hope if things don't go well, Liverpool fans and hierarchy are patient with him like they were when Klopp first come in. I think Liverpool are calm, they're well run, as we saw with Klopp's era. They are willing to commit to a long-term project. They know that results will come if they give it time. So even if things don't start well, I still feel like he'll get them there in the end. So yeah, with Liverpool, I don't think they'll be fighting for the title this year. If they do, it'll be a remarkable job from Arne Slot. But I think 3rd is exactly where they should be, and that's where I think they'll finish. So then, top 2. It's a 2-horse race for me, and last season, it was exactly the same. My heart said Arsenal, my head said Manchester City. Will I go with my head or will I go with my heart this year? I'm going to be bold and put my neck on the line, and I'm going to go with my heart. And I'm going to say that Manchester City will finish 2nd, and their run of 4 consecutive Premier League titles will end, and Arsenal will finally win their first Premier League title in pretty much 2 decades. And there's not much else you can say about these two sides. They are both head and shoulders above the rest. They both are very, very close in terms of how they compete across a season, but the difference always is when it comes to the crunch, Manchester City have the experience and the mentality to handle the pressure and get over the line. But Arsenal are creeping closer every single season, and surely it'll be 3rd time lucky for Mikel Arteta's boys, and they will finally overcome Manchester City, and maybe the noise around the 115 charges, of course, that will be in court in November. Maybe that will provide a bit of a distraction, but I'm not going to take away how much of just a well-oiled machine they are under Pep Guardiola. I'm not expecting a dramatic drop-off. I think they'll be right there. There won't be much separating these two at all, but I think more so as a neutral, I think we all want to see someone different win the Premier League, don't we? And we, as much as we appreciate dominance, we don't like to see it for too long. We always want to see the dominant team knocked off and someone new getting to the top of the tree. So, yeah, it still might be Man City. It's the safe bet, of course, but I think they'll be right up there alongside Arsenal. And I think just because my heart says it this year, I'm going to stick my neck out and say Arsenal will finally win the Premier League. Let me know your Premier League predictions in the comment section below. I think the table is split into some very distinct sections. I think you're definitely going to have a bottom four that I think will be the three newly promoted sides and probably Forest. I think all the others are relatively stable without being spectacular. That could take you from Brentford all the way up to Palace even. And I think the top 8 and top 9 are in a group of their own as well. It just depends on how badly Maresca might do at Chelsea and how teams like West Ham might improve and Newcastle and what Villa might do with, of course, Champions League football as well. But the top 3, I think, writes itself, and it'll be intriguing to see which of the top 2 get themselves or their hands on the Premier League title. But I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. As always, hit a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. It really supports the video and the channel, and subscribe for much more football-related content too. But until next time, guys, a big thank you for watching. Do take care. I'll see you all in the next one.